And Diana, I have 6:30 now, so I'm going to start the webinar and we should see attendees start to join us. And I see one of our other interpreters has joined us. And that off. I believe we're at 5 of our 6 interpreters.
I think that's right. We do have 2 people joined under this, or multiple people joined now under the same.
Actually, I'm the
email.
Mandarin interpreter. I just forgot to update my name. I just updated my name, so.
Great, thank you. We also have many people joined under Asael's Gmail, so I'm not sure if that is a case of an invite being forwarded. Let's see if
that makes sense. That's because it was forwarded to me, so that makes sense. And I'm the second interpreter for Spanish. I'm Madeline.
okay. Jeremy, is it possible for Madeline just to change the name, and would that make it work, or we need it to be through an individual link?
Let me say, I hope so.
Okay.
You should be able to change your name by, if you hover over it.
It's just these are Diana, but these are our interpreters, so they have they were added as their original link. So I'm hopeful that it will, once they change their name, it will consider them the interpreter.
Great. So for those joining us late, we're just ironing out some technical difficulties. We're going to have a lot of interpreters available at this meeting, which is really wonderful. So we'll get started in just a moment. All right, it looks like we've accomplished some stasis, so I'm gonna ask Jeremy to call the roll.
Okay, I just want to make sure all of our interpreters are ready. If they could hear me, if they can acknowledge that in some way. Thank you.
Ready?
Shi Kwan, thank you. Okay, well, I've gotten two. Oh, I see. I'm sorry. Chat isn't coming up for me. Yep, I think we got everybody. All right, great. So we will start. We have three committees this evening. So committee members, I may be calling your name more than once if you're on more than one of these committees. I am only going to call the names of the committee members, but I will write down the names of all the board members who are here if you are not a committee member. We're going to start with the Land Use Committee. So we will start with Joan Body.
Sorry, here.
Thank you. Christina Das. John Fontillis. Cynthia Gonzalez. Diana Gonzalez.
Here.
Thank you. Kenny Guan. Zachary Jacy. Christina Lem. Paul Mack. Antoinette Martinez. Marilyn Melman. Gabino Morales.
I'm here.
Thank you. Karen Rolnick. Damaris Santiago.
I'm here.
Thank you. Katie Walsh.
I'm here.
Thank you. Julio Pena III.
Present.
Thank you. We will move on to the Sanitation and Environment Committee. Let's start with Diana Gonzalez.
Still here.
Thank you. Mel Afzal. Joan Body.
Yeah.
Thank you. Christina Das. Mary Jo Eister.
Here.
Thank you. Nicole Huang. John Johnston. I thought I saw John earlier. Paul Mack. Marilyn Melman. Gabino Morales.
Here.
Thank you. Dr. Carmen Rivera. Sam Sierra.
Present. Good evening, everyone.
Thank you. We will move on to transportation. Katie Walsh.
Here.
I'm sorry, I missed Julio Pena III previously.
Here.
Julio, also for Transportation Committee. I'll take that as a here. Katie, I got you. John DeLuper.
Present.
Sorry, John DeLuper.
Present.
Thank you. Joan Body.
Yeah.
Thank you. Jerry Chan. Diana Gonzalez.
Here.
Thank you. Zachary Jacy. Roberto Martinez.
Present.
Marilyn Melman. I'm sorry, Roberto Martinez.
Yeah, I'm here. Present.
Thank you. Marilyn Melman. Gabino Morales.
I'm here.
Thank you. Sam Sierra. Thank you. And Cindy Vandenbosch. Roll has been called. Sylvia, our Mandarin interpreter, I believe you were coming through on the wrong line because I have been hearing you on the English line. If you need my help, please text me or I'm sorry, send me a message in chat and I will help you join the Mandarin line.
All right, so this meeting is a joint meeting of the Sanitation and Environment, Transportation and Land Use Landmarks Committees. If you don't know me, I'm Diana Gonzalez. I'm the Vice Chair and therefore Acting Chair of Sanitation and Environment. Today, we're going to hear a presentation from the Department of City Planning. This has to do with the City of Yes Carbon Neutrality Plan. Now, what we're specifically hearing about today is the environmental assessment, which is that no environmental impact study is needed. But this is also a chance for us to hear about the plan itself. So we're going to start with a presentation from CPC. Then we'll do board comments, then public comments. And I'm going to make it possible so that, or rather, I shouldn't put it that way. I'm going to welcome comments not just on the environmental assessment, but also on the entire plan itself, because this is a good opportunity for us to weigh in on that. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to City Planning. Take it away.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen really quickly.
And while he's doing that, I just want to make sure, I think we have a little bit of confusion remaining about interpreters. Do we need the interpreters to put themselves on channels?
They have the ability to do that. Some of them have done that. Those who have not, I am assigning them now.
Okay, thank you.
And Jeremy, I think I need to be promoted to a co-host to be able to share my screen.
I'm going to do that first. Hang on.
Thank you.
It's on here. You could show us your screen now.
Excellent. Can everyone see it?
Yes.
All right. Great. Well, I'm going to get right into the presentation and then we can take questions at the end here. So, hi, everyone. Thank you for having us this evening. My name is Juki Sai. I'm a borough planner at the Department of City Planning's Brooklyn office. As you may know, I'm also the liaison to Community Board 7, and I'm joined by Emily, who will be monitoring the chat for questions. We're really excited to share an overview of City of Yes for carbon neutrality, which is a proposal from the department to update the zoning resolution to help meet New York City's climate goals. Before we get started, I wanted to emphasize that, this proposal is one small piece of a much larger initiative by the city and state to fight climate change by reducing climate-altering emissions. Simply put, zoning for carbon neutrality is an update to the zoning resolution to ensure that zoning does not stand as an impediment to building the green infrastructure needed to take on climate change.
Is anyone else hearing the simultaneous translations?
Hang on. I got it. I got to get one more person.
No
Thank
problem.
you.
And thanks for your patience, everyone.
And thank you for providing all of this translation. It's unwieldy, but it's great. We're thrilled to have it.
This is New York City. One of the, that's what makes New York, New York.
I think we got it all now.
All right, I'll jump back in. I just want to say, yeah, simply put, zoning for carbon neutrality is an update to the zoning resolution to ensure that zoning does not stand as an impediment to building the green infrastructure needed to take on climate change. Again, after the presentation, we'll take questions. Anything we can answer on the spot, we're happy to do so. I think I'm catching a little bit more translation.
I don't know why that's coming through. We have them on the other lines.
Interesting, yeah. Should I just proceed and give it another try? Anything we can answer on the spot, we'll try to do so. And if we are unable, we'll bring it back to the department so we can get you more thorough written answers. All right, I'll just go ahead and proceed. And if anyone is having trouble hearing or understanding, just maybe drop it in the chat. And Jeremy, if I should stop or pause, just let me know. So City of Yes for Carbon Neutrality is the first of 3 projects that the Department of City Planning is developing as part of the broader City of Yes initiative. 2 other proposals, Economic Opportunity and Housing Opportunity, will begin more public engagement later this summer. These are all distinct, independent proposals, which are being staggered throughout the rest of this year and into next year. Many of the elements of the carbon neutrality proposal are urgently needed, aimed at delivering zoning relief to home and building owners who are trying to undertake smart retrofit projects to cut energy costs and help the environment, but are prevented from doing so by the current zoning. First, I want to take a minute to frame our conversation. It's important to emphasize that we are facing a climate emergency, as all of you know, and this is largely caused by global greenhouse gas emissions. Carbon dioxide makes up the vast majority of the country's greenhouse gas emissions, 80% in 2019. In 2016, world powers joined together to sign the Paris Agreement, a vision to cut greenhouse gas emissions in order to limit overall global warming to 2 degrees Celsius, and ultimately to prevent further environmental damage associated with climate change. Here in New York City, we've been implementing this vision through a number of initiatives intended to reduce the city's greenhouse gas emissions by 80% by the year 2050, or 80 by 50 for short. So, what does it mean for a city to be carbon neutral? Quite literally, carbon neutrality is a state of net zero carbon emissions, where the amount of carbon being sent into the atmosphere is equal to the amount of carbon being removed from the atmosphere. In this context, a carbon neutral city is one focused on reducing operational carbon emissions, with carbon neutrality being the ultimate goal. Reducing our energy needs, cleaning the grid, and electrifying buildings and vehicles are 3 major objectives towards carbon neutrality. To reduce our overall energy needs, we'll need to retrofit almost every building in the city to become highly efficient and reduce wasted energy. To clean the grid, we'll need to switch from fossil fuels to renewables like solar and wind. And to electrify all remaining energy needs, including our vehicles and buildings, we'll need to move towards electrically powered technologies. As you can see in the chart on the right-hand side of this slide, the key driver of our carbon emissions in the city is our building sector. The foundation of this proposal builds off past work the department has done. In 2012, DCP issued Zone Green, the first comprehensive overhaul of our zoning to allow rooftop wind and solar. Today's zoning for carbon neutrality proposal is in many ways a follow-up to Zone Green, a chance to revisit older rules and update them in response to new science, technology, and regulations. These include, first, a focus on decarbonizing coming from the Paris Agreement and 80 by 50, feedback from architects, engineers, and advocates, including, for example, Urban Green Council's Zone Greener report, and then also recent laws and regulations, including the Climate Mobilization Act, and at the city level, this includes Local Law 97, a very important one, which will impose strict fines on large buildings that do not reduce their carbon emissions, and then also the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act at the state level, which set an ambitious solar and energy storage goals for the city. Again, I want to emphasize that zoning for carbon neutrality will not change or contradict anything in these laws. Rather, it will update the zoning resolution so that it does not impede the changes necessary to comply with these laws and meet these goals. Development of this proposal began a little over a year ago when Mayor Adams announced his vision for City of Yes. Since then, we've conducted extensive outreach with stakeholders across the city to help ensure this proposal would be helpful to those who are trying to add solar, electric vehicle chargers, or heat pumps to their homes and businesses. We've held 4 open to the public info sessions, and we've partnered with the Urban Green Council to convene a group of technical and policy experts to review and provide feedback on the initial draft of this proposal. Along the way, we've engaged in conversations with partner agencies and local stakeholders regarding what zoning changes may be needed to help achieve our collective climate goals. From these conversations, we've identified a number of ways that zoning can be modified. Tonight, we'll review the 4 key goals the proposal seeks to support via 17 specific zoning changes. Again, ZCN will not, and ZCN zoning for carbon neutrality, I'll be saying that a lot, will not change the city and state's goals or laws. It's a proposal for these specific changes we've identified that are going to help meet these goals. The first key goal to support the decarbonization of is to support the decarbonization of our city's energy grid. Illustrated on this slide are initiatives already underway at the state or city level. These are not part of our zoning proposal, but this is the context in which our planning work is situated. By 2040, New York State is legally required to achieve 100% renewably based energy grid, which means developing large amounts of offshore wind and bringing more clean hydroelectric power from upstate New York and Canada. I believe you're all familiar with the vital role that Sunset Park will be playing in the wind energy production with the Empire Offshore Wind Project, through which operations are going to be running at South Brooklyn Marine Terminal. This goal also includes putting all of our rooftops to work generating energy across the city. To utilize energy from offshore wind and from rooftop solar, our energy grid will have to become smarter, more decentralized, and more resilient to fluctuations, with resources spread throughout the city. To support this cleaner, decentralized grid, we will need more local energy storage, essentially large batteries that will act as the glue holding the grid of the future together. To support the ongoing work of cleaning the grid, New York City zoning can help in 5 key areas. First, rooftop solar. Rooftop zoning allowances should be modified to ensure that there aren't any limitations holding us back from our solar goals. In many districts, there are limits on the amount of rooftop that can be covered by solar canopies. This proposal will ensure that roofs can be completely covered by solar. 2, parking. We need to take a similar approach with our city's 8,000 plus acres of open parking areas and ensure that solar canopies are always allowed over existing parking lots. 3, community solar. One site that generates clean energy that is used throughout a neighborhood is considered a commercial use in our current zoning. This limits where community solar can be installed. Our proposal would allow community solar, like Sunset Park Solar, to be installed in all zoning districts, including large residential campuses, hospitals, schools, and colleges in residential districts where we believe it is a great fit. 4, energy storage. We need to ensure that safe FDNY and DOB reviewed energy storage facilities are located where they are needed most. Energy storage is currently not allowed in residence districts where people need access to clean renewable energy. Zoning must be updated to add specific rules for energy storage and help facilitate its rollout across the city. And finally, onshore wind turbines, which face strict limits in today's zoning. This proposal will create a new tool for future applicants to submit onshore wind facilities for a public review process with the City Planning Commission. The second goal is to eliminate fossil fuels from our city's million-plus existing buildings, almost all of which will still be here in 2050. The deadline for our carbon neutrality goals, 2050 that is. These buildings are by far our biggest sources of carbon dioxide emissions, so we'll need to retrofit virtually every single building. This involves retiring all oil or gas-powered furnaces and boilers and replacing them with new, highly efficient electric systems and improving the efficiency of exterior walls, windows, and roofs to keep the heat and cool inside. It's important to note that two laws adopted by the City Council in 2019 and 2021 are crucial here. For large buildings, which are defined as buildings that are 25,000 square feet and larger, Local Law 97 will begin to impose fines if they do not cut their carbon emissions. Fines will begin rolling out in 2024 and increase through 2050. Second, Local Law 154 requires that all newly constructed buildings are electrified from the start. Fossil fuel-based equipment will no longer be allowed in new construction. Within this context, zoning can help support the decarbonization of buildings in three key ways. First, electrification retrofits. Zoning can provide more flexibility to accommodate the increasing need for outdoor equipment, such as heat pumps, which cannot be located in building basements or cellars, to be located above the zoning height limit on building rooftops. Second, exterior retrofits. When someone is trying to add thicker insulation or reclad the building by removing an old facade and replacing it with a new one, a new, more efficient one, zoning should not prevent them from undertaking this project. And then third, fixing zone green. The 2012 Zone Green Wall Thickness Deduction awards a small amount of additional floor area for better than code buildings. Here, it is updated to reflect the latest energy code and best practices for the future. So these are a few of the components of the zoning, but with regard to cost and implementation of these retrofits, many funding sources at the federal, state, and city level are available. The New York City Accelerator Program, which is separate from the Department of City Planning, is a program run out of the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice that helps connect property owners with technical and financial support to make these changes. The third goal we're seeking to support with zoning is decarbonizing our vehicles. There are currently 2 million private vehicles registered in New York City, and less than 1% of them are zero emission. By 2035, New York State policy has indicated that all new vehicles sold in the state will need to be zero emission, and we need to prepare for that future. There are federal and state initiatives to help vehicle owners make the switch to electric. At the local level, the zoning that regulates private parking and charging facilities needs to be updated to help New Yorkers make the switch to electric vehicles. Finally, this proposal also aims to support alternate modes of transportation, such as bicycle, scooter, or mass transit. Zoning can help support this goal with 5 key changes. First, allowing commercial charging facilities in all commercial and manufacturing districts. They're currently prohibited in about half of the city's commercial districts. Second, allowing building owners to designate a portion of their existing spaces as public electric vehicle charging charging sharing spaces. These are the same rules that currently apply to car sharing vehicles in existing parking garages or lots. Third, to allow more flexible use of public parking lots, public parking garages, and commercial accessory parking facilities by allowing car rental, car sharing, commercial vehicle storage, and public electric vehicle charging within these facilities as well. Fourth, expanding special rules currently in place in Manhattan today to allow for indoor automated parking facilities to be an option citywide. And then finally, an update to the parking rules to acknowledge the need of public bicycle parking and allow bike parking facilities in commercial districts. Finally, our last goal relates to reducing our city's stormwater and solid waste and eliminating the carbon emissions associated with both waste streams. We can reduce stormwater runoff by promoting greater permeability on site. This means less water flowing to energy-intensive treatment plants. We can reduce the energy associated with hauling and processing of garbage by reducing the amount. Up to 45% of our waste stream is organic material that should not go to landfill and can be reused within the city. And we can reduce the carbon emissions associated with our food by promoting more local food production on our city's rooftops. Within this context, zoning can help decarbonize our waste stream in 4 key ways. First, clarifying our zoning's paving rules to ensure that permeable paving, which allows water to infiltrate into the soil beneath it, is always allowed. Second, upon our zoning, updating our zoning street tree requirements to allow for new high-performance tree bed types like connected tree beds and rain gardens. Third, currently the resolution does not account for composting or recycling. We're looking to add specific rules clarifying where these uses are allowed to help those sectors grow. And lastly, rooftop greenhouses are allowed on top of non-residential buildings, but to build one, current rules require that you obtain a certification from the chair of the CPC. By streamlining this requirement, we will allow DOB to review applications for building permits, cut costs, and to simplify the process for those looking to grow food on rooftops. This concludes our overview of the 17 specific zoning changes we've identified to help support the larger goal of decarbonizing our city. As a citywide zoning text amendment, all 59 community boards are concurrently reviewing this proposal with their borough boards and borough presidents. In July, the City Planning Commission, the CPC, as I said earlier, will hold a public hearing on the proposed changes. Community board resolutions can be submitted to the CPC up until their vote in mid-September, where the commission will vote on approving or modifying the proposal. It will then pass on to the City Council, where the council will have 50 days to review and vote on the proposed changes. Again, thank you for listening. We're happy to take any questions now. And like I said, anything we can answer on the spot, we're happy to do so. And anything else we intend to take back to the department so that the more technical experts who really dug in and wrote a lot of this can get back to you with more thorough written answers. All right, thank you.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much. So one thing I just want to ask you about, this was a lovely presentation. It's my understanding that the environmental assessment said that there was no need for an environmental impact study. Is that correct?
Yes, there is an EAS for this. So it's like a slightly not as extensive as the EIS review, the environmental impact statement, but there is environmental review for this project, but it did not by the sort of seeker guidelines that the department uses, reach the threshold under which we typically do an EIS.
Okay. So I'm going to kick it off and then I see hands up already, which is fabulous. So first off, a quick question. Why are rooftop greenhouses not being allowed on top of residences? That doesn't make sense to me.
I actually don't know the specific answer to that question. I will have to get back to you, but that's a great one.
I would encourage you to allow that. You know, my rooftop was used to test out growing grapevines on a rooftop, and that later became rooftop reds over at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. So okay. I think when we allow people to grow things on roofs, sometimes cool things can happen, and I'm 100% for it. Now I wanted to ask you about the energy infrastructure facilities. I believe that was what you were talking about in terms of having batteries in residential areas.
Yes.
And this was allowed to be facilities of up to 10,000 square feet built as of right. Was what I believe I read in the zoning text amendments.
Sorry, the like residential, let's see, solar arrays. I believe, yes, like battery storage facilities up to 10,000 square feet as of right. Yeah.
Yeah, I know that in a subsequent city of yes, there's going to be a push for more residences. And I wonder whether these two things aren't in conflict. Is it possible to, put battery storage in basements or on roofs and still have housing built instead of taking residential properties away from that use and using them for energy use?
Diana,
Vicky,
oh,
may I-
sorry. Go ahead, Emily.
Yeah, so the energy storage system proposal here is actually like explicitly to allow them on residential rooftops. It's not like in residential areas instead of buildings that people live in. It's about finding ways to make them possible on rooftops.
So the
That
thing
contain
about
residences.
10,000 square foot facility is that 10,000 square feet would be in addition to residential use, or would that be part of the FAR?
So it would be, it's on the roof. And the threshold there is if it's under 10,000 square feet, then it would be permitted as of right on the roof of existing buildings. And if it's above, then it would still need a special permit from the BSA.
Okay, yeah, I think in this community district, there are not a lot of 10,000 square foot rooftops. That's really big. So basically, this would be allowed as of right everywhere in the community districts. But as long as there's also housing, I'm happy with that. So thank you for that clarification. That wasn't clear to me in the text. And then I guess my next question is about the lack of mandates. There are a lot of things that are allowed here, but not required. And so things like, using permeable paving materials, or, when you're buying a new boiler, when you're replacing an old one, are you mandated to buy an electrical one or not? It seems like all of that is missing. And that's a major impediment towards reaching these very ambitious goals that you talked about.
So, Diana, I think that's a great question. And I think I'll defer a little bit to just the broad framing of what this text amendment's intended to do, which is that I think a lot of the meat of the mandates is coming from the city and state laws, like local law 97, and the requirement to do to hit these specific energy goals. And I think the understanding that there are a lot of teeth in these pretty robust laws that I'm sure you know well. The intent of this is not to, so the intent of the zoning text amendment we're proposing is really to just facilitate all of the kind of to not let zoning stand as an impediment to all of the sort of goals and mandates laid out in these laws, but in this text itself, not to sort of impose the mandates, with the understanding that we have faith in the sort of ability that the laws are going to do that.
Fair enough. Fair enough. We don't have to expect the zoning text amendment to fix all of our problems, just some of them, right? So then I guess the last thing I have questions about is vehicles. So one of the things I'm concerned about, obviously I'm for greater use of electric vehicles, but I do have questions about, possibly undesirable side effects. One is stress on the electrical grid. We know right now the electrical grid is routinely at capacity in the summertime. You have a peaker power plant right here in Sunset Park that gets put into use. There's not going to be an explosion of windmills and solar panels overnight. And so we're talking about creating additional strain and thus incidentally additional pollution. And so, I feel like the environmental assessment really glossed over this problem. This whole the grid is going to be 100% renewable by 2040 sounds nice, but I think we need to be prepared for the possibility that we're going to fall short. So I think I would personally encourage further study in terms of that. The other thing is that electrical vehicles are very heavy. They're much heavier than other cars, and that means they're more dangerous. And so I think we've really ignored the traffic safety implications of having a fleet of more deadly vehicles on the road. And then also that added weight affects road maintenance. So I think there are a lot of things here that really haven't been taken seriously. And I'm not saying I'm against electric vehicle charging. It's just we have to be ready for what's going to happen, and we need to make policy changes to accommodate for this shift. And then my last thing is I would also suggest that the cap on 50% of parking being allowed to be used for shared parking and car sharing and car rental. I don't see the need for that. I hope that we one day live in a future where nobody feels like they have to own a car, and whenever they do need one, they can just get it through a car sharing. So the last thing I'll say is that there are a lot of things in here that I really like, but obviously I'm fixating on the things I don't like. So overall, I am broadly in support of this, but I would like to see some changes, especially changes with regard to car dependence. There are some things that aren't in here that I think some other folks on this committee are going to discuss. Like there's no change in mandatory parking in new large buildings. There's no addressing of the explosion of last mile trucking and all the traffic that's put on the road, and there really should be a zoning definition just for that, or at least some kind of a variance where you have to apply for variance to open a new facility. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my fellow board members, and I'm going to ask Jeremy to handle calling on people.
Diana, could I just respond to something really quickly? And
Oh yeah.
I really, again, very much appreciate this feedback and find it really constructive. I just wanted to say also, and I think it's a very thoughtful response regarding electric vehicles. And then also something that I've spoken with Jeremy about in the past is, the idea that we really do want to see, more use of a broad use of electricity, electric vehicles, electric buildings, et cetera, which will add stress to the grid. And there is a peaker plant in Sunset Park. And this is something that has been brought up and is, an important concern. I think a big part of, sort of something we touched on here is the broad goal, again, of the laws. And then also what we're hoping the zoning will facilitate is the making pretty much everything, but especially buildings, more efficient in their energy use to bring down the stress on the grid as we simultaneously shift over to electric. So that's really a lot of like one of the sort of driving logic of I think the policy and the laws, but that efficiency and that really decreasing the stress on the grid, particularly from buildings, is just so important here, with the understanding that we're going to be taxing the grid for a lot of things, but we want to be as efficient as possible in what we're doing. But thank you these are really great concerns, and we're noting them.
Thank you. And, Jeremy held up his hand, so I do want to put on the record that there are 3 peaker plants in CB7. All right, Jeremy, I'm turning it over to you.
Thank you, Diana. I have Jerry Chan first.
Hey, thank you. I had my hand up for a long time. I actually forgot some of my questions, but I do agree with the chair that there is something in the presentation that I like. There's something that I am questioning about. The one thing that I'm questioning about is the power grid, right? Everything that you had in there makes sense, right? But in order for us to make that happen, the power grid have to be have to bring it up to 2023. So that means replacing all the copper lines and increasing the copper lines and stuff, right? So they don't get burnt out. In Sunset Park, I know during the summertime, because it happened to a lot of business owners that came to me and complained that during a hot day, a lot of the old power line get burnt out, right? So in order for me to support this, right, I have to get an understanding what is the city, the state is going to do to build up this whole power grid infrastructure first. So can you kind of shine some light into that? Or maybe you did already.
Yeah, Jerry. So I'm going to be honest. I will likely need to really defer to some of our technical experts on that, because I think that's a great question, and I don't want to give a response where I'm not fully informed on it. What I do want to say is part of the strategy with the grid, and this is not a direct response to what you're saying about the actual lines themselves, and I'm not an expert on that. But a big part of the sort of the intent, again, of the broader policy and what we're hoping to help facilitate with the zoning is the kind of dispersing of the grid across the city. And when we talk about allowing more energy storage in local neighborhoods. Part of the idea is that rather than the sort of the stress all in one place being just sent out across the grid, that there's ability for specific, let's say, offshore wind energy coming into the city via South Brooklyn Marine Terminal to be stored locally. But I guess, yeah, broadly, I will need to follow up on that. But there is attention being paid to how we can update the grid to meet the challenges of
I got you on that, right? So let me follow up with some you say too, right? Is you mentioned about that power storage, right? Turning into a certain area into power storage. I don't know if you've been following the news lately, right? There is a lot of e-bike fire.
Yeah.
Right? E-bike. Okay. That the city is imposing that no e-bike going to any residential building, night building, so on, so on, so on.
Mm-hmm.
Right. We know even Tesla, right? They are importing the battery from China. Right.
Yeah.
Building a power storage in some building, right? I think that it might turn into a fire hazard, right? A fire trap, right? So again, battery. We're not quite there yet, knowing how a battery really operate, right? Battery will explode or overheat for no reason. Example, your laptop we buy from like HP, Dell, whatever. It still expand, it still explode, right? Putting a storage in building doesn't make sense to me because it's unsafe.
Juki, may I?
Yeah, go ahead, Emily.
Yeah, so we definitely are paying a lot of attention to that. The proposal that we presented today was developed in partnership with every city agency that exists, including FDNY. And we have a letter of support posted on our website from FDNY for this proposal. I do want to clarify that when we talk about energy storage systems on buildings, they are fundamentally different from e-bike batteries in a number of ways. They're larger, they're stationary, they are subject to very stringent inspections and certifications before and during installation. While e-bike batteries are often not certified at all, they require regular recharging, they are on the move, they're in motion. So there are a lot of added concerns with those batteries. They're a very serious concern. So I just want to be clear, like yes, I understand where that is coming from. There are some fundamental differences. And we're not talking about like putting hundreds of e-bike batteries on roofs. We're talking about like a very formal piece of designed infrastructure that has to go through DOB and FDNY approvals before being installed.
I understand. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Right? I do understand that. Right. I'm not a city planner. I can tell you right now, I'm not a planner. I'm not a urban planner and stuff. I am an engineer. I am a computer person. I do know about this. I built when I was in junior in high school in 1988. I built did a proof of concept that built a solar array that able to capture solar array in the middle of the night. Okay. The project is being used by NASA right now. Okay, so I do understand this stuff. I still understand how weak the power grid is. I actually could bring you to a company that did a whole model, right, to prove to the city government that the city doesn't want to do anything about it, the vulnerability of the power grids, right? I understand all this stuff, right? That doesn't matter how much I give you guys. You guys always come back. The city always come back that certain agencies and stuff did this. Remember, technology, batteries change every single day. Every single day, something new come up. The presentation you guys put together with the subject matter expert could have been no longer expert. Someone else may come out, become the subject matter expert, right? Again, for me to support this, right, you really had to do a study on how to upgrade the power grids, right, the infrastructure before I really could support this and putting everything in place. Believe me, 1988, I was talking about using a solar array, not sunray, solar array up in space to power up everything.
Jerry, I just wanted to say, I appreciate this concern, and I think, we don't want fires where we live. I think as New Yorkers, we all share that concern. the best we have to offer is thorough inspection from FDNY and DOB on these. And I can, again, try to follow up and answer questions about power grid specific things. But I thank you for sharing that concern.
Yeah, please. Thank you. We could go on, but I'll let someone else talk. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Mary Jo Eister next.
Hi, thank you. And thank you for this presentation. It is really comprehensive, well organized, and it's a lot for me, I'm not an engineer. It's a lot to absorb, but I wanted to just ask actually a process question, and that is whether it would be possible to put up, I think the penultimate slide, but one of the slides that actually shows the 17 proposals that changes to the zoning codes, because I feel like a lot of the questions or some of the questions that we've been addressing and discussing are policy questions that are ancillary to the zoning changes, but not what's really before us. And there were a lot of things. So great, that's up. And I don't have any specific questions about the items yet, but I want to just take a little more time to absorb them. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary Jo. And I actually really appreciate bringing it back to the zoning here. And we also can send this whole presentation, any further information you want on this, we're happy to share it also more in depth on the individual proposals. And I can, if you want to contact me through Jeremy, or I can just send it to Jeremy directly.
I'll also say I put in the chat links to more information, including a PDF of this spread of a even more detailed version of this proposal. So I will put that back in.
And just to clarify again, because I do understand the difference. I mean, the zoning is intended to support the underlying policy decisions, but these 17 proposals, as you said earlier in the presentation, are to sort of clear the way so that the policies that have been either adopted or are being proposed can be implemented without zoning putting the brakes on. I mean, and zoning's supposed to put the brakes on, but these are areas where we want to kind of open the
maybe what we should say is places where we think outdated zoning that doesn't reflect the sort of 21st, like the sort of 1960s zoning that we don't think reflects 21st century needs is impeding this. But no, that's a really great framing. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I have Gabino Escamilla Morales next.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you for your presentation, sir. I appreciate this. I do have a serious question regarding adversaries to the country and anyone that may want to harm our city. So in regards to protecting energy infrastructure, what is the city doing, or is our city planners planning with the state and the government to protect our energy systems from adversaries? And if that's happening, what are the backup systems that we may have to protect our energies? And thank you very much, because moving towards 100% renewables is going to help our planet.
Thanks, Gabino. I don't have a great answer for you on the nature of the sort of security of the grid itself. That is something I can ask our team, but I think, to be honest, I think that might be something that the utility companies are slightly better equipped to answer. But again, this is something I can ask our team and try to get back to you on. But that's a good question.
Yeah, I think I'll just add, we definitely can follow up with a better answer on that. But one of the many benefits of a more dispersed energy grid is that it's not just one huge plant that's providing energy for hundreds of thousands of people. It's a more dispersed grid, so that makes all of it more resilient to any kind of unexpected impact, whether that's an adversary or a hurricane. The idea is that we're less vulnerable because the system that we're relying on is less easy to take down all at once.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And God forbid, yes, somebody attacks this grid, and because we have new technologies and we want to avoid any type of EMP attacks or something like that. And I just want to make sure we have some backups for any type of security risks that may happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have Damian Andrade next.
Hi, I want to say thank you for this presentation. I feel like I learned a lot. I guess some of my questions would be on one of the slides, it's saying that you guys work with like nonprofits, partner agencies, as well as dozens of nonprofits and private sector groups. I just want to like know what type of private sector groups are you guys working with, and if these private sector groups are also sharing whatever they're like participating with the community, because to me it sounds like they're private, so they don't have like an obligation to share their type of work or how they're contributing to this project in general.
Thanks, Damien. Emily, I'll defer to you on this one, or if not, I may need to get back to you on that about the partners. But that is, yeah, I guess is the question, if sort of what parts of their plans are private partners disclosing around their plans for future resilient or future plans to meet these goals. Is that I want to make sure I'm framing that correctly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. This slide, like the logos you're seeing here, reflect some of the many groups that we engage with during early outreach. So it's not, and they also all agreed to have their logo shown. We met with many other groups in addition during public outreach sessions, targeted outreach sessions, like topic specific meetings where we would meet with a group of zero waste advocates to hear about any ideas they had for ways in which they've run into zoning as a problem, or locating a compost facility. That's just one very specific example. I think for every proposal you see, there were meetings with people who work in those fields full time and also advocate in those fields. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but this is just like a tiny snapshot of what we're trying to communicate here is that we didn't do this work in a vacuum, and that it represents feedback from many different groups across the course of over a year.
All right, thank you. I guess my second question is regarding, like, let's say if the zoning changes does take an effect and it does pass, would you expect any any challenges regarding some of these buildings to host some of these energy of storages, like within buildings, or even like, for instance, like a lot of apartment buildings? There's a lot of renters and there's a lot of apartment buildings in CB7. So I just wanted to know if there would be any challenges regarding landlords if they want to, because I believe it was touched base a minute ago about the enforcement. Like even with local law 97, it's not really enforced itself. So it's like, how is this going to really achieve the goal by like by a certain time if there might be outside challenges, like landlords might disagree with this project, might not want to go through it. So like, wouldn't that kind of be one of the barriers in order to accomplish this project to be in full?
Damien, I think that's a really sort of important question to ask about. Just, there's a lot that relies on, we've, what did I say, 2 million buildings in New York, or million plus buildings in New York City, and how are they all going to get up to code? We as city planning are not in charge of enforcement. And I think a lot of, again, I keep going back to this, but sort of what we're hoping is to not erect barriers to the landlords who are really moving to add solar onto their rooftops and to retrofit their buildings to have more insulation so that, heat and cool stay in. What I can try to do is, and I don't know this super well, but just look up some of and try to get back to you on some of the enforcement mechanisms that the city and state will be using. And that's, again, somewhat outside of our direct purview here at city planning, but I can try to see what the enforcement looks like and get back to you on that.
Thank you so much. That should be all of my questions.
I have John DeLuper next.
All right, thank you, Jeremy. And thank you to Juki, and Emily for this informative presentation. I also have a few questions, and I'll go through them one by one because they're kind of complicated. They're informed not only by what you presented today, but also the materials on your website and some of the other, I know I attended one of the other presentations you mentioned. So my first question was something, and I think it's related to what Diana mentioned about there being something on there about substations and transformers being allowed in large residential buildings. Is my understanding from this that these transformers are needed for the larger buildings and that they are currently allowed in basements and will continue to be allowed in basements? I ask this because I hear that other cities and states do not allow this. So if you go to places like Jersey City or Newark, you know, larger cities in that kind of are nearby, a lot of these buildings have these transformers at the ground floor level. This is not as good for people because, you know, they take up space that could be retail or community facilities, but it is, if it's a safety concern, then we want to be sure what we're doing is safe.
Can we take them one by one?
Please, please.
Okay, so I think there's a little bit of confusion that I want to clear up. In the energy storage system proposal, is that what you're referring to? Okay, so here the issue is that our zoning resolution doesn't know what an energy storage system is. They're new enough that they're not in the ZR, so zoning resolution. So they're currently being considered the same as a transformer or a substation. That is severely limiting where they're able to be sited. We're not proposing to change anything about where you can site an electric utility substation in New York City. What we're doing is proposing a new use group that's specific to energy storage systems and clarifies that they're a different thing and then has different rules for where they can exist. Does that make sense?
Perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So then the next question was, there was talk about changes to allowing the building materials. And did I hear it right that this is in historic districts? I asked this because here in CB7 a couple years ago, there was a large area designated as historic, and there have been efforts to landmark specific sites. From hearing this presentation, my understanding is that a building in a historic district or that has been landmarked could have new insulation, rooftop solar panels, and even changing the materials of the facade on the outside to meet these goals. And I ask this because I know people who've been deterred from buying homes in historic districts because of concerns they couldn't, you know, upgrade their buildings to the latest standards. But I also know a lot of folks would say that this kind of goes against the spirit of this kind of historic preservation requirement in the city. So if you could clarify that a little bit, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, so we're not proposing any changes to the way historic districts or historic landmarks work in the city. We're proposing to change the underlying zoning rules. So a building in a historic district that's zoned R5, yes, is subject to R5 zoning, but in order to make any changes, they have to go through the Landmarks Preservation Commission and have those changes approved. That will remain true. So just because we're proposing that 100% of a rooftop could be covered in solar, if it's a historic district or a historic landmark, there are additional constraints within the LPC about visibility of solar panels and preserving the historic character. So everything you see in this presentation would have limits and overview from LPC if it's a historic district or landmark building.
Okay, cool. And then in terms of the charging stations, did I understand it right that people could create charging spots on residential streets?
So the zoning resolution is all about lots. It doesn't touch streets. So DOT, the Department of Transportation, has the power to make that kind of decision. We at the Department of City Planning can only impact what is allowed on a lot, a zoning lot or a tax lot. So our parking proposals here reflect that limitation. And what we're proposing is changes to the way residential accessory parking can be shared for publicly accessible charging units.
So that means that you could do more charging in the garages, like you said, or in the commercial facilities, but it's not something like you couldn't on your property set up a charging thing. Like, and I asked this because now I see sometimes with more electric vehicles, people are running their cords across the sidewalk to try to, and that seems like something that zoning might be a tool to address in a way. To have spaces where this could be done without crossing across those public right of ways. But maybe I might be off base on that.
I mean, the overall goal here is to open up more flexibility to site electric vehicle charging stations across the city. Our proposals there on this slide, they're 9 and 10 and 11 are related to, so 9 is about making it easier to site a commercial charging station. Proposal 10 is about allowing up to 20% of spaces in private residential parking facilities to be publicly accessible charging stations. That really applies to large apartment buildings that have parking garages. And then proposal 11 is a similar change for existing commercial non-residential parking spaces, opening up more flexibility for spaces within those facilities to be publicly accessible charging stations.
Okay, cool. And I'm going to ask one last thing, and it's going about the battery storage for the buildings. Did I see somewhere in there that, speaking to Jerry's concern about safety, that any systems have to be Underwriters Laboratory or EU compliant or some other safety compliance, or that's beyond the scope of this kind of thing?
I'm not sure about the exact compliance level. That's something, Emily, I don't know if you know off the top of your head, but John, I can ask about that and get back to you on that, sort of what type of compliance FDNY and DOB are mandating.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Appreciate it. And thank you for your patience walking me through some of the intricacies of this. Thank you.
I have Cindy Vandenbosch next.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So I just, I'm not an expert in this, but I do have a question specifically about the requirement that all vehicles by, was it 2035, would need to use, would be electric. Is that correct?
So I believe it's, and I think this is a state law, but it's all new vehicles produced need to be electric. So I think, like, if you're, if you have a gas powered car, I believe that's grandfathered in, but I think it's new vehicles.
Okay. And so, and would that apply to any person or any like city agency that's purchasing a vehicle in New York State?
I believe it will, but I'll also say a huge percentage of New York's vehicle fleet is electric already, or hybrid or electric. I can get the exact number back to you, but as far as if this, I think this applies to all vehicles, including city vehicles.
Okay. Okay. And so that's built in though to this zoning text amendment or no?
So that's actually something that is like, again, the laws we mentioned, the sort of state level and city. And I'm going to be honest, I don't know exactly which one, but as far as what is included here in the zoning, we actually don't have any power to sort of mandate a specific vehicle type, electric or combustion or hybrid or anything like that. But the idea is that along with electric vehicles, you need charging stations. And charging stations are something that are related to sort of where you can locate them is an important issue. And the intent of the text, the proposal you see in front of you is to basically adjust the zoning so that locating chargers in sort of more useful and frequent places is possible and not prevented. So that when, basically when electric vehicles are much more, are the predominant use, that users are able to go charge them easily and, don't need to drive a long distance to do so.
Okay.
And Katie just put it in the chat, but yeah, so we're referencing a state law that passed in 2022 that will require all new vehicles purchased in New York to be zero emission beginning in 2035. And Katie shared a helpful link to more information about that regulation. So again, it's separate from this proposal. We're responding to it. We're recognizing that the number and share of electric vehicles in the city is going to increase very drastically in the next decade because of this policy. And right now, there's not charging infrastructure to facilitate that.
So I guess like one question I had about this was, and it might be early to be thinking about this, but we have to think about it, which is with this shift, especially in Europe and the United States to electric, which I do fully support, and it is really important, but there are challenges associated with that relate to sourcing like batteries and the raw materials and labor practices in those countries. And I know that on the federal level that there's work that's being done on that. But we are also going to end up with a lot of batteries that we don't want to end up in landfills. And maybe it's too early to build in spaces, but the easier it is for people to recycle the batteries, which is also its own can of worms right now. Like the recycling of batteries has a variety of challenges that I know researchers and different levels of government are trying to tackle right now. But I would like to see in the future, if we are forward thinking, making it easy, because the last thing we want is for these batteries just to end up in landfill because they're too difficult to take apart, or there's no incentive system in place where it's like cost effective for recyclers to like recycle these batteries, with market pricing basically. And so I don't know, from a zoning standpoint, just thinking to the future, maybe it isn't in this carve out, but if there was a way to make it very easy for people to recycle the electric batteries, that then we're not producing, like we're not putting toxins into the environment or creating waste unnecessarily. It's a big issue. It's like bigger than just New York City. But I'm just wondering if that was part of your discussions and if that, is something you're thinking towards, because that could also be incentivized or built into how we think about where we place these recycling, where people can take their batteries.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And it's separate from DCP, but I want to give a plug for legislation that just passed City Council last week. The council's New York City Zero Waste Act, which is a package of legislation focused on waste related issues, and does kind of start to tackle that really important issue.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. I have Katie Walsh next.
Hi, both. Couple questions. Can you tell us how it was determined that you wouldn't require the full EIS? Why was that ruled out?
So Katie, that's a great
The
question.
environmental impact statement. Sorry, I should define that.
Yeah. So I'm not a seeker expert here, and I can again follow up in writing around this decision. I think part of it's basically in the EAS. There are these like various, I believe, 19 or so different criteria that our seeker team, our environmental review team, looks through to decide. And these range from, whether it's like traffic, shadows, very like a whole set of criteria laid out in the seeker manual that basically we review, we look through, and there's a sort of process by which if it crosses the threshold around these specific things, then it triggers a larger EIS. And again, apologies for not sort of having the full scope of the seeker there. What I will say is there are components of this that we did, like parking, for example, and this parking is a major environmental concern. But parts of this that we did actually kind of leave to our later zoning proposals, the zoning for housing opportunity, which itself will require an EIS because it did trigger those components of seeker. Emily, I don't know if you have anything to add, but Katie, that's a good question that I think should get a slightly more technical answer. But what I can say is that we have our criteria, we review them that are in the seeker manual, not that not our internal criteria, and it did not meet it.
I know that other community boards who have started to have hearings on this have raised this concern that there isn't this process of having an EIS wasn't triggered. That's the feedback that people are giving about wanting to support it. I think you're hearing that the overall goals and outcomes of trying to support New York City's transition and get the zoning regulations out of the way of the goals that we have. I think there's a desire to do that, but needing to actually follow a process. And in particular, several people talked about peaker plants. And we are already an overburdened community that is dealing with asthma respiratory rates at a rapid rate. So I would say that it is in much of the spirit of wanting to see the objectives and goals for this. It's a concern that we don't know, and we haven't been provided information in the time that we're meant to review this to, in a thoughtful way on why this EIS process isn't being done. And I'm gonna leave that statement there to say, like, yes, I think follow up and provide that, but something that is glaringly missing from this text amendment and from DCP is the silence on doing anything to deal with last mile trucking and trucking facilities in this district. We have spoken about this robustly before, about the fact that this is missing from this text amendment, specifically where DCP says it's complicated, but then there's been no action taken by DCP. And when there has been a submission for a special text amendment to deal with last mile trucking, that triggered an EIS impact statement. And so it's not lost on me that this text amendment that's being proposed by the city, which doesn't include this major issue on last mile trucking, doesn't go through this process. And yet when there are entities and organizations trying to take action on a special text amendment, an EIS is triggered. So again, I would like to, Diana did ask it, and I think I heard it mentioned by other people, but this is the second question, which is, can you be on the record on why last mile trucking is not here when this is about a goal that's being achieved? And then can you also talk about what is actually happening related to taking action on this from DCP?
Thanks, Katie. I think this is certainly not the first time we've talked about this. And I'll start by saying, I've heard many, many times about how last mile is a pressing issue, not only for CD7, but also CD6 and many other parts of the city where people live near these distribution facilities. And, not only feel the environmental impacts of increased truck and van traffic, but also serious traffic safety implications, that I've been not only seen myself, but also heard quite a bit about. As far as just also something, you mentioned about the like the special permit or the proposal that we have requiring an EIS. Again, there's a set of seeker criteria that we evaluate all proposals by. And if it meets certain criteria, it triggers an EIS. And, our own zoning for housing opportunity, it's our proposal. It's coming, later this year. That itself will trigger an EIS. Again, we're not arbitrarily deciding this. It is something that, as I'm sure many board members are aware, often the subject of lawsuits and not something that the department takes lightly in deciding whether something is an EAS or an EIS, and there was sort of intention around that. As far though as we are working internally to study the issues around last mile, and I know that's not the most satisfactory answer around what is a pressing issue for, again, not only CB7 but many residents of the city. But what I will say is the real focus, as I think we've talked about in zoning for carbon neutrality, is lessening the impediments of what we believe is outdated zoning, or allowing the really robust laws that New York State and New York City has passed around environmental or sort of climate change mitigation and green infrastructure to take place, and making sure that zoning is not standing in the way of those necessary changes. Last mile, as everyone on this call knows, not only extremely sensitive, but very complicated in that it both has the environmental impacts and also traffic safety impacts. And we, at the department believe it's its own unique thing. Again, serious impacts, but also a sort of unique bucket of work that we didn't feel fit alongside the rest of the zoning for carbon neutrality proposal, which again is not limiting uses or restricting density or restricting specific operations. It is very much just sort of tweaking the zoning to allow these law mandated changes to happen. And the specific things that I think have been touched around or sort of proposals around last mile, like limiting uses in specific areas, limiting density of specific facilities. That is something that I think in spirit and in practice is different from what we are proposing in this, despite the fact that it is related to significant environmental causes. And then the one other thing I will say is that regarding sort of last mile use, I think something we've heard is the encouraging of use of electric vehicles by these facilities, by distributors like Amazon, UPS, etc. And again, that's something that the state law is working towards mandating, and that, again, in its very small way, zoning, this proposal is looking to make easier the use of electric vehicles. So, I know that's a lot, but, I think this is a serious question, and it is something the department takes seriously, but it is not part of this proposal for the reasons I just explained.
Thank you. The last panelist hand up is mine, so I will speak in a moment, but I will invite attendees to raise their hands if they would like to speak or ask questions as well. So I appreciate your last answer, but I will point out that electric vehicles run people over too. I think part of the problem is emissions, but the other part of the problem is the volume of trucks this community is expected to take. Juki and Emily, I thank you for the presentation and also the previous presentation that I saw and spoke to you at the Borough Service Cabinet earlier this week. Two of these issues that I bring up are going to sound familiar to you. The first, and I want to echo Diana's words here, I'm worried that the city is creating demand for additional electricity before we ensure supply. And in a community like Sunset Park, which does have 3 peaker plants, one of which, the NIPA facility, when they built it against our wishes in 2002, they said it will be decommissioned in 2012. So here we are 11 years later, it still isn't decommissioned. I'm worried that there, at least in the interim, there's going to be a need for additional use of diesel and natural gas in this community, making our air quality poorer while we electrify the city. The second issue I wanted to bring up, and you said there wasn't a study on this, but I'm sure this is going to make developing property more expensive. So my question is, why isn't there a study telling us what the impact would be on developing affordable housing, what the additional costs would be, which would obviously be an impediment to creating additional affordable units? Why hasn't a study been done on that? And then my new issue, as I listened to you tonight, I got a green thumb myself. Community Board 7 is the proud home of Brooklyn Grange, our rooftop farm at 28th Street at Liberty View Plaza. They're growing food there. But my concern is food is not the only legal crop in New York City, in New York State. And we're looking to simplify the process to allow rooftop greenhouses as of right. I'm worried that our waterfront will be opened up to commercial pot farms as of right. So I was hoping you could address those 3 issues. And then I see another hand up.
Yeah, Jeremy. So I'm gonna have to. These are all really good questions. As far as the marijuana farms, I'm gonna have to ask about that to our technical team. And I think the question about making property development more expensive. I think broadly sort of a couple things related to that. In terms of the cost of some of the retrofits themselves, as I mentioned, there's the New York City Accelerator Program, which is intended to allow sort of property owners to be connected with state and federal like rebates, funding opportunities, etc. But as far as the law itself, which I believe, and forgive me for forgetting the exact law, but the city or state law that really does mandate just green, like these electric facility, basically more efficient buildings, and more use of electric boilers, heating, cooling systems, etc., or maybe not boilers because they're electric heating and cooling systems, is already sort of passed into law. And essentially, if these same developers, if they don't adhere by those laws, they would get fined, which itself, those fines add up. That adds to the potential cost of, you literally are not allowed to do so. So as far as I think that's a really great question, like, is the sort of more robust, expensive process going to impede potential affordable housing development? And to that, I guess my answer is that this is sort of already a law that these, new construction needs to meet these specific environmental standards. And if anything, I think what the hope is with zoning here is to facilitate that and lower the barrier to that construction that is mandated by law. So again, that might not be exactly satisfactory, but I guess our point is the potential barriers may either come through the fines of not meeting these goals. But yeah, it is something that, I think it is a good question. And if you want more information on that, I can try to bring it back. And then finally, the peaker plant question, I think I answered it as well as I could earlier, Jeremy. I think it's a really valid concern. And again, I think the intent with the broad policy and then this, these zoning changes to support it. But, especially with the added ability for buildings to retrofit to make them more efficient. The intent is that we basically decrease the need for we make buildings more efficient and decrease their pull on the grid as we broadly increase the usage of electricity as a primary driver of the various building services that we need.
Thank you. I have 2 additional hands up from panelists. Again, I would invite attendees to raise their hand if they wish to speak. I have Antoinette Martinez next.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I have a quick question regarding the racial equity report. And I see that this proposal is subject to the requirement, but it looks like there's a number of exemptions due to the nature of the report. And correct me if I'm wrong or if this was covered previously, but I'm just curious what exactly would be assessed in the racial equity report for this proposal.
So Antoinette, that's a great question. And, I think the RER is a really important component of any application, and RER, racial equity report. I'm not exactly sure about the exemptions, but typically what RERs cover is a lot of the demographics. Some or many of you may have read some of these reports, but typically what is covered in them is the sort of demographics of usually it's a specific community board. I guess for the citywide text, I don't know if that's going to be citywide, but typically it is about various sort of demographic statistics and then statements from the applicant, in this case us, related to that. Emily, I don't know if there's more on the RER that we can comment on, but that is something I can, Antoinette, if you have sort of specific questions about what will and will not be covered in it, I can try to get you more information on that, especially kind of the what will be included in that report.
So it is available online, and I posted the link. I think what you're referring to is some of the sections are for example, total non-residential zoning square feet that would be added as part of this proposal. That is, a lot of the sections are designed for kind of private applications that are proposing to rezone and increase residential floor area. So compare the sections that apply to a citywide text amendment are somewhat different. But is that what you're referring to? Why are some of the sections left blank in the report?
Right. Is this a copy of the slide deck? If you can, I believe it's the slide either 14 or 15.
Sorry, what slide were you?
Sorry, you have a slide that covered the racial equity report. Let me see. Oh, it looks like it was omitted from the presentation, but it's included on the link that you circulated on the chat, where it where it mentions the exemptions made. And like you mentioned, it was to, I believe it mentioned construction jobs, and then also like the rents in the area. So I was just curious what exactly would be assessed if there were all of those exemptions made. Let me see if I could pull it up.
Yeah, I think we should follow up on that. You're referring to slide 14 of the longer presentation that I shared in the chat.
I believe so, yes. I have to pull up the presentation that was sent, but I think it was that one, yeah.
Yeah, I think that what we can say for now is that a racial equity report exists for this project. It's posted on the zoning application portal. And I think we can follow up and summarize exactly what it says and what parts it wasn't, it didn't study.
Okay, thank you.
I have Katie Walsh next.
Yeah, I just I wanted to go back to the comment around what this is doing and what it's not doing, and the fact that it doesn't address anything to do with last mile trucking impacts. And Jeremy's point around if it's an electric truck or electric vehicle, still some of the challenges that we face. So again, like, what is like studying the issue? We've been having this conversation with DCP for years, and this Commissioner Garodnick, I mean, nothing has happened as far as I can tell. There's been no commitments, no action. So again, this is a failure of, here you have a zoning text amendment and nothing is being publicly put out and addressed around maritime or zoning text or anything related to last mile trucking, disproportionately, impacting our community in Red Hook and others. So it's just the absence of it, and the silence from this administration on this issue is just deafening. And it's like, in a moment when you're rushing a process. I mean, this came to us very late. You guys are rushing a process for carbon neutrality because you've got 2 other zoning and text amendments that you're going to bring to us in the fall. So you're rushing a process to get through in the spirit of the overall goals, but then doing nothing on this other major issue that we have been engaging with DCP on for years. So I just, it's like, yes, we're here and we're talking about this and figuring out the zoning text amendment and things that we can do to, set us up to be able to achieve the city and the state goals. Yes, 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 but also, and I don't know how many times we have to engage DCP on this conversation when you guys are the ones who play an incredibly important leadership role. The other thing is, I don't know this is a genuine question, but I'm just really struck by the fact that this peaker plant issue is a really big problem. And it just seems like, yes, overall goals for the city and the state of New York, but then yet again, Sunset Park, the impact that happens to our local community with air quality issues and asthma. I mean, just basically asking us to like believe in the intent and hope it happens when there hasn't been a rigorous study. I mean, that's what I'm taking away from this presentation. And I mean, that is not something that would offer someone confidence and support, like, what we hope to catch up on. Like, we want these peaker plants. We don't want them, right? And we don't want them to be impacting our community. So we don't want them used. And so if we're rapidly installing electric vehicle installation, again, like, okay, in the spirit, we don't want people actually, buying their cars, but if they're buying cars and go electric, but like, how can you guarantee that this is not going to have a negative impact on this community when you haven't done an environmental impact statement in a full way? It just seems like, again, Sunset Park, this community, right, has to grin and bear it, basically, is the positioning. So yeah, I mean, it's 2 parts. It's like the lack of inaction on anything related to this last mile trucking stuff, but then also like how can one have confidence in this proposal when a study hasn't been done to figure out how a community like Sunset Park with peaker plants is going to be impacted?
Katie, again, I think the points you're raising are extremely valid. Regarding, why we're bringing this text amendment and not last mile, I think I sort of outlined how I know it's disappointing to say it's something that we are looking at and working on without being able to share on it, but that's what is going on. But I suppose that the intent here, again, the sort of the spirit, and I know I'm repeating this, but the spirit of the zoning text amendment in front of you all is, again, to just update the components of the zoning resolution in order to allow these robust city and state laws to really take hold, and to allow all of the sort of laws and goals laid out by the city and state to sort of make it so that zoning's not standing in the way. And last mile, again, which is, the intent is not to diminish this as it is a very important issue, but again, some things we see as slightly different from what we're doing with this text amendment. And again, the peaker plant issue, it's, now been raised a couple of times, and something, we're absolutely going to bring back to sort of as a concern with our technical team and see if there's more information that we can, give you on it. But again, the broad intent is to, and and such a kind of core piece of this is to make buildings more efficient. Buildings being such a core piece of the pollution going on in the city, to reduce that strain, and to do it as quickly as possible, and to lower any barriers to reducing that strain that buildings are putting on the power grid. So again, I know these are really serious concerns, and I apologize for this, what seems like a somewhat unsatisfying answer, but that's what I can share.
I think I just want to add that with the peaker plant issue, like on the slide that we're looking at, everything in the first two columns is addressing that question. And yes, there are proposals where we're talking about increasing demand for electricity through things like heat pumps that will increase demand for electricity in the winter. Things like increasing charging for electric vehicles, but we're countering that with producing as much clean energy in the city as possible by making it easier to cover as much of our rooftops with solar panels as possible, with all of these other things that are about generating clean energy in the city and making buildings more efficient. So it's definitely on our mind. It's definitely a huge part of this proposal. But we definitely also hear that we need that there's a need
You
for.
guys just you need to back it up with proof points. I mean, we're city of New York, right? Like this is not like we're proposing a major zoning text amendment. This needs to be backed up with data, and you guys need to be able to say projections. This is going to offset it. This is not like, I mean, again, this is coming to a community board out of the spirit of respect of like going through and listening to your presentation. If you don't have the answers tonight, I understand that, but in thinking about this in a serious way, right? Knowing that other community boards have provided that level of feedback, that is something absolutely that the technical team should be providing. And if they haven't done it, then that opens up a whole series of questions. If they actually haven't looked at the demand generation for these types of energy in buildings to offset, like that's where I'm saying it needs to be more than just like, this is the goal and this is the intent. Like we actually need to be able to have some data behind it. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I also just want to say, and I will continue to share these links in the chat, but the presentation we gave tonight is an abridged version of a much larger presentation. Just because Juki and I don't have every answer to every question doesn't mean that it wasn't part of the study, it isn't part of the report. A lot of these questions are answered in documents that are available on our website. They're answered in longer presentations that we've been giving since October. And I also just want to clarify, because we've had a couple of questions about the environmental review, that an EAS was performed. It's a 250-page document. It's on our website, and it goes through 19 areas where in each one, it was found that there wouldn't be a significant impact on that area. So it's not that there wasn't an in-depth environmental review performed, it's that that review did not trigger further environmental review.
All right. So I just want to try to look at that racial equity report. I was not able to find it at the link that you provided. I would want to bring up one other issue that I forgot to mention earlier, which is the issue of brownouts in the summertime when we lose power. And, you know, the reality is that brownouts are racist. It has happened several times in my recent memory that Windsor Terrace did not have a brownout and Sunset Park did. So you have this situation where we're going to be significantly increasing the amount of electrical usage, and we have a racist electrical utility that puts this burden disproportionately. And that's something I would like to see in an EIS, which I think is warranted, and in the racial equity report. So with that, I think we've heard from everyone who wanted to speak. And so I think we can put an end to the presentation. Thank you for joining us, folks. Thank you for answering all of our questions. So then I think my question to the community board is, what would we like to do next? We have two things to potentially comment on, which is the plan itself and separately the environmental assessment. Katie, I see your hand up.
I had more actually a point of information, Diana. Do we need to take a vote on this between all the committees before next Wednesday?
Take a vote on what?
So, whether or not I don't know, like I'm not proposing resolution right now, but like, are we taking a vote on a resolution tonight related to this text amendment?
So
go ahead, Jeremy.
So, and Juki could, and Emily could tell me if I'm wrong. We are not required to have a vote on it. We may choose to have a vote on it.
So we can say something or we can say nothing, and we can comment on the EAS or on the plan itself or both or neither. So
Jeremy, if I may, and Emily jump in here. I believe, I believe it is up to you to decide on the vote, but broadly, and I think there's a lot of really valuable feedback and questions shared here today. The CPC is, will read like this is like all of the community board statements, as I know this is not this is a text amendment, not a map amendment, and not a ULURP action. But it is like the CPC will receive all of the board's feedback on this, including if there's a vote on it.
And what, Juki, only if there's a vote on it?
No. I think, and Emily, sorry, I can double check on that, but I believe whatever you submit. Sorry.
So, for example, if we took no position but sent you a letter with all the concerns that were brought up tonight, that would be reviewed. Am I correct?
It would be reviewed. And the deadline, there's some time. So the CPC vote is scheduled for September 13th. We're receiving formal votes. We're also receiving letters and resolutions, and each community board is approaching it somewhat differently.
So September is the deadline for comment?
Yeah, okay. September 13th.
I think we can put something together before that. Yes, Antoinette.
Will these committees be meeting before September?
We would have to convene a meeting, especially since it's three of us, and that might be complicated by the fact that these three committees may not continue to exist if there are changes to the committee structure of CB7. So my inclination is to make a decision tonight while we're all here.
I'm going to do another point of information just to ask the other text amendments that are coming to us soon, the ones that are in housing and the economic, what are the processes that are we're very quickly going to have to do this for other text amendments. So do those have votes? What's the process related to those? The reason I'm asking is just because, again, I think we should treat the carbon neutrality text amendment with the same rigor and process that we're going to treat the other two. So that's what I just wanted to ask, if the other two are going to require a vote or resolution.
Katie, well, that's, I think, a great point. Like, as far as the rigor with which you're treating them both, like them all, we appreciate that, and we appreciate the feedback. They, as a text amendment, it's not like it's not technically a ULURP action, but it is still, again, like Emily said, we're receiving different feedback from boards in different manners. But how Community Board 7, whether it is a letter, a vote, similar to what you provide on ULURP applications, the degree of sort of what feedback you want to provide, it will be sent to the commissioners and they will read it. And sorry, just to make sure I'm answering your question, was there a question of like sequencing of them, or if they just have different
other
process?
two are gonna, my understanding is the other two are also gonna come our way, and I don't know your set timelines, but just, are those gonna have the same sort of flexibility of like, we could vote or not, we could do letters, resolutions?
It's the same process. Yeah.
It's the same process.
That's a good
Okay.
question.
Again, I'm just sorry, I'm taking the mic here to say that I think that my recommendation, this has an impact on the community, and the others will as well. And I would propose that, again, we go through this in a thoughtful way, and that there is some sort of, I know we write letters to agencies all the time, but this is a proposed text amendment, and I think we should be on the record and call votes and have a vote on it. That would be my proposal, but the wisdom of others on the call would invite you, Jeremy, Julio, others on the call.
So I raised my hand. I am neutral as to whether or not this board decides to vote or not. I will just say, if the board chooses to vote, the last full board meeting that we have before the September 13th deadline will be next week. So if you choose to take a position to vote, it will be brought up next week. The letter doesn't necessarily have to be written right after that, but if you choose to vote, it should probably come from this committee or potentially at next week's board meeting.
All right, Cindy?
Yeah, and just to that end, I think the question too would be, can we have the documentation out to all the board members so they can be informed and vote at the next board meeting and feel like they're ready for that? So it sort of depends on whether it's going to be possible to turn around the sort of report in time for people to have time to review it.
Yeah, which is why when we first started talking about this, we were saying this is very rushed that this came.
Mm-hmm. I think we should be ambitious personally. I think we should try to make it happen. We can send the presentation that was given today along with our notes of how it went.
You could also share a link to the YouTube recording to every board member. So even if the report's not done tomorrow, they could watch this meeting tomorrow.
They sure can.
So if you are sharing, I would, I think Emily mentioned there's a deck with all of the proposal, like more detail on all the proposals. If for anyone who wants to look at it, it just like goes through piece by piece and gives more details, just to add that.
So yeah, we can put that all together, right? Yeah. So then I'm just going to go out on a limb and make a proposal and see what people think of it. I propose that we send a letter requesting an EIS and delineating the specific concerns that we think have been ignored, and secondarily include in this letter our comments on the text amendments as a whole and what we think are the shortcomings. I see nodding. I'm making that as a motion.
I second.
Maybe,
I heard a lot. Yes,
Sorry.
did someone have comment? All right, I heard like 4 seconds. I don't know who any of them were.
So you would have to recognize that. I can't.
Yeah,
So you may want to ask for it again.
yeah. Can we do that one more time with feeling? Now I have no seconds.
Somebody could just jump in and say, I second.
I second. This is Antoinette.
Great, thank you, Antoinette.
So just to clarify, it's not taking a specific position, but it's to write a letter with our, everything that's been brought up tonight.
I thought I was suggesting that we ask for an EIS.
Oh, I'm sorry, with the request.
And then have comments. Cindy, I think your hand was still up from before, right?
No, just a point of clarification.
Yes.
By next week, would we have what those comments would be so that the full board would know what will go into the letter? Like generally speaking?
There will be minutes from this meeting, or at least notes from this meeting, and every board member will have the opportunity to review this meeting before then.
Okay.
And I'll present a summary as well.
Okay, great.
Yes. And then Katie, you had a point as well.
yeah, hopefully my internet connection is stable. So now, sorry, I'm going to screw up the process. Maybe I'm proposing an amendment to the resolution that's been, okay. So then maybe this is a different proposal, but I would think that the proposal would be yes with conditions. I would think that this board could vote on a proposal that's yes with conditions, and the conditions then can outline several of these issues that, understanding that this community in particular with the peaker plans, the EIS, like we can outline it. But actually I would propose that we would take a position on it as opposed to no position, which I think is what I just heard with the letter. So it's a yes with these conditions. So that's the proposal.
That would be on the text amendments, right?
Yes.
So we're kind of saying do an EIS and then on the text amendments, yes with conditions.
Let's see if I'm saying this right. Yes to the text amendment with the conditions that an EIS is done, that the peaker plant issues addressed. Hopefully I'm not saying something different. If someone, anyone wants to clarify, please go for it.
So I think I understand what you're saying. You're saying we vote yes on the text amendment if they meet these other criteria.
Which we can write out. And just to explain the rationale, I think it is a good thing for us to take a position on this text amendment with these conditions addressed, as opposed to just sending a letter. Like I would propose that it's a good thing to provide that, yes.
So this is something that we have done before in other land use matters where we say yes under the following conditions.
Okay.
Yes, that's the proposal to amend.
I accept that proposal, Mary Jo.
The amendment.
I'm having trouble thinking about how we can conditionally say yes if part of the proposal is for an environmental impact statement, and if that happens and we learn that there could be a really adverse impact on our particular community, I just don't see how that fits together with a conditional yes.
It could say something like, yes, finding that an EIS is conducted that doesn't have a disproportionate impact to the community board 7 community. I mean, it would be inherent in the resolution proposal language itself.
But what's
So
a
the yes
disproportionate
would be
impact?
conditional on them meeting our criteria.
But what is the criterion then? Disproportionate impact is not a very precise quantified level, right? I mean, it's what is disproportionate in my view might not be the same as what's disproportionate in someone else's view. I don't know. I'm just confused by how that would work.
All right, I'm gonna turn it over to Julio.
Hi, good evening. I just wanted to clarify the right now we can determine what our asks are in the conditional yes. And like we're speaking in a little like broad terms of like it's this, it's that, it's EIS, it's peaker plants, like, but as we draft what the statement looks like, it can be far more specific because we're saying like, yes, it's a proportionate impact, but then we're going to outline this is what a disproportionate impact looks like in our neighborhood and in our city. So like we're speaking in, I want to make sure we're not getting trapped in kind of the minutia, because the minutia will be figured out as we draft the letter and statement.
All right, so then I guess for clarifications, I accepted Katie's amendment. Do I need to get a second again? I don't know how this works.
I'll second.
Thank you,
Katie's
Julio.
amendment.
So then I guess let's roll call this just so we're super clear. So Jeremy, can you
Just point of order.
Yeah.
We need to have discussion on the and then we can go to
Thank you, Cindy. All right, let's discuss. I think everyone's looking at the clock and wanting to go home.
Can I just say something? I don't want to discuss, but I do want it to be restated so that I understand what we're voting on.
We're voting to send a letter that requests an environmental impact study be completed and to take certain things into account, such as peaker plants and et cetera, and also to voice our approve or support with conditions of the zoning text amendment changes. Amendment changes is redundant. You know what I mean. All right. So
I'll call roll.
Yeah, that.
So this will be presented by the Sanitation and Environment Committee. We will start with the Sanitation and Environment Committee members. And then we will move on to the other committees and the other board members. So we will start with Diana Gonzalez.
Yes.
Amel Afzal. Joan Body. Christina Das. Mary Jo Eister.
Yes.
I should be saying your votes. So Diana Gonzalez, I had yes. Mary Jo Eister, I have yes. Nicole Huang. John Johnston. Paul Mack. Marilyn Melman. Gabino Morales.
Yes, yes.
Gabino Morales, yes. Dr. Carmen Rivera. Sam Sierra. Julio Pena.
Yes. Sam Sierra says yes.
I'm sorry. Sam Sierra, yes. Julio Pena.
Yes.
We will move on to transportation. Katie Walsh.
Yes.
Katie Walsh, yes. John DeLuper.
Yes. Yes.
John DeLuper, yes. Joan Body. Jerry Chan.
Yes.
Zachary Jacey.
You got me right. Jerry's a
I'm
yes.
sorry. I keep forgetting to do that. Jerry Chan, yes. Zachary Jacey. Roberto Martinez.
That's an affirmative, Roberto Martinez.
Roberto Martinez, yes. Marilyn Melman. Cindy Vandenbosch.
Yes.
Cindy Vanden Bosch, yes. John Fontillis. Cynthia Gonzalez. Kenny Guan. Christina Lem. Paul Mack. Antoinette Martinez.
Yes.
Antoinette Martinez, yes. Karen Rolnick. Damaris Santiago.
Yes.
Damaris Santiago, yes. Beverly Kleinman. Cynthia Felix. Damian Andrade.
Yes.
Damian Andrade, yes. Doris Ostall.
Yes.
Doris Ostall, yes. Esteban Chavez.
Yes.
Esteban Chavez, yes. Nicholas Jackson.
Yes.
Nicholas Jackson, yes. Richard Codor.
Yes.
Richard Codor, yes. Ryan Smith.
Yes.
Ryan Smith, yes. Jeremy Kaplan. I believe I called everyone. If I missed a board member, please raise your hand. Cabino, I called you for the one committee. I don't call you for every committee. You only get one vote.
I got you. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, I believe we've reached the end. One. Diana, the vote is 18 yeses, 0 noes, 0 abstentions.
All right, sounds like we got a plan. So unless there's anything else, I think we can wrap up.
Thank you.
Diana, maybe I would just, oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Second that.
If there are suggestions on text, we covered them in the meeting, but they can be sent to the email, Jeremy's email that I can just put in the chat here. So if any board members, community members wanted to add anything, just please send it to Jeremy, who can distribute it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you and good night, everyone.
Thank
You all in
you.
person next week.
Everyone.
Good night,
Yeah,
you
in
all. Have a
person.
great night.
Good night.
See you next
All right.
week.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.